My family banned me from every gathering because my stable life made my sister feel bad about her endless failures. They even skipped my wedding. They didn't know I held a secret to their biggest asset. I used to think that love, especially family love, was an unconditional thing, a bedrock. It wasn't until my own happiness became a problem for them that I realized my family's love came with a very specific, unspoken contract. The terms were simple. My role was to be the stable, successful, and low-maintenance daughter, the one they could point to with pride while they focused their real energy on the permanent five-alarm fire that was my half-sister, Chloe. And for 32 years, I fulfilled my end of the bargain without even knowing I'd signed on. My life, especially since I met Liam, was everything I had worked for. It wasn't a life of fireworks and grand gestures, but one of deep, quiet contentment. Liam and I were a team. We built our world on a foundation of mutual respect, shared jokes whispered in the kitchen, and the comfortable silence of two people who just fit. He was a landscape architect, a man who created beauty and order from chaos. And in a way, that's what he did for my heart, too. With him, I felt seen. I felt safe. It was the kind of stable, healthy love that feels like coming home. That feeling stood in stark contrast to the constant upheaval that defined my father's household. Not a week went by without a frantic call from Chloe. At 28, she had the emotional maturity of a teenager and a talent for choosing the most catastrophically unsuitable men imaginable. The calls were always the same. Last Tuesday, it was about a musician who'd used her credit card to buy a new guitar before vanishing. The month before, it was a personal trainer who was secretly married. I was in my car on the way home from work when my stepmother, Linda, called. I didn't even need to say hello. "Anna, it's Chloe," she said, her voice tight with practiced urgency. "It's happened again. The new one. Mark, he just packed a bag and left. She's devastated." I sighed, gripping the steering wheel. "What happened this time?" "She doesn't know. She gave him everything. She paid his rent for 2 months because he was between jobs. She just doesn't understand why she keeps attracting these awful men." I stayed silent because what I wanted to say was she attracts them because she offers them a blank check and a place to live within a week of meeting them. But I knew that wasn't my role. My role was to be the sympathetic ear. "Your father is on his way over there now, with soup," Linda continued. I don't know how much more of this her heart can take. She's so fragile." Fragile. That was the word they always used for Chloe. It was a shield that protected her from responsibility, a label that demanded the world bend to her emotional needs. I, on the other hand, was the strong one. I was the one who'd put myself through college, built a career as a project manager, and never asked for a thing. In fact, I'd only ever given. A decade ago, when they wanted to buy the house they live in now, the one with the big yard and the rose bushes Linda is so proud of, they were short on the down payment. I had just received my inheritance from my maternal grandmother. It wasn't a fortune, but it was everything to me. Without a second thought, I transferred the entire amount to my father. I remember that day so clearly. We were standing in the kitchen of their old, cramped apartment. My father, his eyes misty, had put his hands on my shoulders. "Anna," he'd said, his voice thick with emotion, "we couldn't do this without you. This house, it's your future, too. Your sacrifice is the foundation of this home. We'll never forget that." I believed him. That memory, that promise, became the bedrock of my trust in him. I saw it not as a loan, but as an investment in our family. In my family. I never realized that in their eyes, the foundation was something you simply stand on and forget it's even there. The first crack in that foundation appeared on a mild October evening. We were at a restaurant called the Gilded Perch, a place with dark wood and low lighting, to celebrate my father and Linda's 35th wedding anniversary. The tension was a familiar guest at our table. Chloe was there, picking at a piece of salmon as if it had personally offended her, her face a mask of misery from her latest breakup. Liam, bless his heart, was trying his best. He was telling a charming story about a difficult client who ended up loving his design for a public park. He was witty and kind, and I watched my father, despite himself, crack a smile. "We've been talking about getting our own little piece of land soon," Liam said, his hand finding mine on the table. "Nothing grand, Just a place with good soil. I want to build Anna a garden she can get lost in. I beamed at him, my heart full. In that moment, surrounded by my family, holding the hand of the man I loved, everything felt right. It was a fleeting, perfect moment of happiness. And then I saw it. Across the table, Chloe's chin began to tremble. A single, perfect tear rolled down her cheek and dropped onto her salmon. She didn't make a sound. She didn't have to. It was a masterful performance, designed for maximum effect. The already strained conversation faltered. The clinking of silverware seemed to echo in the sudden silence. I felt a chill spread across my skin as I felt Linda's gaze, sharp and cold as ice, fix on me. She cleared her throat, her voice just loud enough for everyone to hear. "It must be so simple," she said, staring at a point just over my shoulder. "When the world just gives you everything you want." The words hung in the air, thick and poisonous. She didn't look at me, but the accusation was as clear as if she'd slapped me. My happiness was an insult. My joy was a weapon pointed at her daughter's heart. I looked at my father, pleading with my eyes for him to say something to defend me. He just stared down at his plate, meticulously cutting his steak into smaller and smaller pieces. He had chosen his side. The rest of the dinner was a blur of forced smiles and suffocating silences. Liam and I left as soon as we could, the celebration ruined. As we walked out into the cool night air, I felt like I had done something terribly wrong, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out what it was. All I had done was be happy, and I was just beginning to understand that in my family, that was a violation of the terms. The phone call came the next afternoon. It was Linda. Her tone was syrupy sweet, a tactic I knew all too well. It was the voice she used right before she moved in for the kill. "Anna, honey, I want to talk about last night," she began. "I was so worried about you." I was confused. "Worried about me?" "I'm fine, Linda." "Are you, though?" she murmured. "You just seemed a little oblivious. Flaunting your relationship like that when you know what a delicate state Chloe is in. It was a bit cruel, don't you think?" The accusation took my breath away. Flaunting? Linda, I was just existing. We were having a conversation. I'm not responsible for how Chloe feels about my life. "Oh, honey, of course you are," she said, her voice hardening slightly. "We're a family. We have to protect each other. Chloe is in immense pain. Seeing you and Liam so disgustingly happy is like rubbing salt in a very deep wound." I felt a surge of anger, hot and sharp. So what am I supposed to do? Pretend to be miserable? Hide my relationship? Liam is my partner. "That's the thing," she said, and I could hear the trap snap shut. "We all love Liam, of course. But his presence, it's just too much for her right now. So, your father and I were talking, and we think it's for the best if you come to Thanksgiving alone this year. It's a family day, and we need to prioritize the family member who is struggling the most." I was stunned into silence. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a decree. Exclude the man I love to appease my sister's fleeting emotional state. It was insane. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "Absolutely not. Liam's my family. I will not treat him like a shameful secret. If he's not welcome, then I'm not coming." "Well, I'm sorry you feel that way." Linda's voice turned to ice. "You are being incredibly selfish. You need to decide where your loyalty lies, Anna. With your boyfriend or with the family that raised you." She hung up before I could respond. For the next week, a heavy silence hung between me and my father's house. I kept waiting for his call, hoping he would be the voice of reason, the dad I remembered who promised to never forget my sacrifice. The call finally came on a Thursday evening as I was leaving the office. "Anna," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of warmth. I knew instantly that Linda had coached him, handed him a script. "Dad," I said, a desperate hope fluttering in my chest. "About Thanksgiving. Your mother and I feel that your attitude is creating a toxic environment," he recited, as if reading from a teleprompter. "Your refusal to consider Chloe's feelings is tearing this family apart." "My attitude, Dad, my attitude is that I'm in a happy, healthy relationship. How is that toxic?" He ignored the question. "Until you can learn to be more considerate," he continued, his voice unwavering. "It's best if you don't attend any family functions. Not Thanksgiving, not Christmas. None of them. The words hit me with a physical force. It felt like the air had been sucked out of my lungs. He wasn't just uninviting me from holiday. He was banishing me. He was amputating me from the family. Are you serious? I whispered, sinking against the cold brick wall of my office building. You're kicking me out of the family because I won't hide my boyfriend? This is not about your boyfriend, he said, his voice rising with a defensive edge. This is about your selfishness. Actions have consequences, Anna. You're right, I said, a strange, cold calm washing over me. They do, and you've just made your choice very clear. I ended the call. I slid down the wall until I was sitting on the cold pavement, the city lights blurring through my tears. He had erased me. The man who had promised my sacrifice was the family's foundation had just ripped that foundation out from under me. I had given them my inheritance, my unwavering support, my quiet compliance for years. And in return, they had exiled me for the crime of being happy. When I got home, Liam took one look at my face, wrapped me in his arms, and just held me while I sobbed into his shirt. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just listened, and when I was done, he looked me in the eyes and said, "Their love is conditional, Anna. Ours isn't. We're your family now." The next few weeks were a strange mix of grief and liberation. I mourned the loss of the father I thought I had, but I also felt a weight lift. There were no more obligatory Sunday calls filled with Chloe's latest drama. No more walking on eggshells. No more carefully monitoring my own joy. I threw myself in my life with Liam. We took weekend trips. We hosted dinner parties with our friends, people who celebrated our successes instead of resenting them. I started to breathe again. During this time, I leaned on my actual mother and my stepfather, Frank. When I told my mom what had happened, she was incandescent with rage. That is not protection, Anna, she'd seethed over the phone. That is emotional blackmail. They've enabled Chloe into a state of permanent infancy, and they expect you to pay the price for it. Frank, a retired accountant and the most practical man I knew, was quieter but just as firm. This is a pattern, Anna, he said during one of our Sunday lunches. It's a toxic system, and you were right to refuse to participate. But even with their support, the gaslighting had taken its toll. Late at night, the doubts Linda had planted would whisper in my mind. Was I selfish? Did I overreact? Maybe if I had just agreed to go to Thanksgiving alone, none of this would have happened. It was a poisonous echo of years of being told my needs came second. Liam would find me staring at the ceiling and gently pull me back to reality. You are not selfish for having boundaries, he'd say, his voice a steady anchor in my sea of doubt. You are not cruel for refusing to be manipulated. They didn't exile you because you did something wrong. They exiled you because you did something right. You stood up for yourself, and they couldn't handle that. It was a slow, painful process of deprogramming. I had to unlearn the idea that my worth was tied to my usefulness to them. I had to accept that the love I was grieving was for a family that had never really existed, a fantasy I had built around a single, broken promise. The pain was immense, but with every day that passed, it was replaced by a growing sense of clarity, and a cold, hard resolve was beginning to form in its place. 3 months after my exile, on a crisp spring evening in the public park he had designed, Liam asked me to marry him. He got down on one knee by a fountain he'd built, the city lights twinkling around us, and promised to spend the rest of his life being my partner, my advocate, and my family. My yes was immediate, joyful, and absolute. The ring was simple and elegant, a single, clear diamond that felt like a promise of clarity for our future. That night, I didn't feel like a banished daughter. I felt like a cherished woman about to start her real life. The joy, however, was tinged with the inevitable dread of telling my father. A small, naive part of me hoped this news would be a bridge. Surely, his daughter getting married would be enough to snap him out of Linda's spell. I was wrong. When I called him, his congratulations was as flat and lifeless as a dial tone. There was no warmth, no excitement. We're planning a small ceremony in the fall, I said, trying to inject some cheer into his silence. He cleared his throat. Well, Anna, that's ambitious. Frankly, we have other things on our mind. We're considering selling the house, to give Chloe a proper start in life. Maybe a deposit for her own place. She needs to finally get on her feet. The world tilted. It wasn't just the casual dismissal of my engagement. It was the mention of the house. My house. The house built on my inheritance. The promise he made, the bedrock of our relationship, was not only forgotten, it was being repurposed. He was planning to take my sacrifice, my future, and hand it to the very person whose manufactured fragility had been used as the justification for my exile. In that instant, something inside me shifted. The grief that had clouded my heart for months evaporated, and in its place was a feeling as hard and clear as the diamond on my finger. It was no longer about hurt feelings or family drama. It was about a profound, calculated betrayal. The fight was no longer just emotional. It was now about justice. My first move wasn't a scream or cry. It was to go down to the storage unit in my basement. For 2 hours, I sifted through old file boxes, my hands covered in dust. My heart pounded with a mixture of dread and determination. And then I found it, a bank statement from 10 years ago showing the exact amount of my inheritance being transferred directly from my account to his. Step 1 was complete. Our wedding was beautiful. My mother walked me down the aisle, her eyes shining with pride. Liam's family embraced me as their own. It was a day filled with genuine love, a stark contrast to the conditional affection I had left behind. My father, Linda, and Chloe were not there. Their absence was a painful, empty space, but it was also a cleansing one. The real counterattack began a week after we returned from our honeymoon. It started with my phone buzzing. A text from my Aunt Carol, my father's sister. "Anna, I think you need to see this." It was a screenshot from Chloe's Facebook page. The post was vague, a masterclass in passive aggression. So hard when you realize some people would rather have money than family. Praying for my dad, who has been so deeply betrayed by someone he trusted. Then came the calls. Distant cousins, old family friends. Linda had been busy, weaving a tale of a greedy, ungrateful daughter who had become enraged after being cut off financially and was now making her poor father's life a misery. The narrative was clear. I was the villain. I felt sick. They weren't just content to erase me. They were trying to rewrite my entire character in the minds of everyone I knew. That evening, I got a text from Chloe herself. "Anna, I'm so sorry for everything. My heart is broken over this. I know we've had our issues, but I hate what this is doing to Dad. Can't we just talk and fix this? Please don't do this to him." The old me would have wavered. The old me would have seen a sliver of hope, an olive branch. But the new me saw the manipulation for exactly what it was. It was a trap, a ploy to get me to engage emotionally, to back down before I even began to fight. My fingers were steady as I typed my reply. All communication will now be through my lawyer. The final piece of the puzzle came from Aunt Carol. She had always been a quiet observer in our family, a woman who saw everything but said little. She had attended my wedding, her hug tight and her eyes full of a sad understanding. After seeing Chloe's post, she was done being silent. "Your father has lost his way, Anna," she said over the phone, her voice crackling with a long-suppressed anger. "And a grandmother would be horrified. He made you a promise." "I know he did. I remember him writing to me about it." My breath caught. "He wrote to you?" "Yes. Let me look." An hour later, my phone pinged. It was a photo of a handwritten letter on faded blue stationery. The handwriting was my father's, unmistakable. The letter was dated a week after I had given him the money. I read the words, my vision blurring. "I can't believe it, Carol. Anna gave us her entire inheritance. Her generosity is astounding. That money is the only reason we could get this house." I told her, this is as much her home as it is ours, a security for her future. I stared at the screen, tears streaming down my face. But these were not tears of sadness. They were tears of validation. It wasn't a figment of my imagination. It wasn't a misunderstood conversation. It was a promise in his own hand, a truth he had tried to bury. I had the bank statement. I had the letter. I had his betrayal, Chloe's manipulation, and Linda's campaign of lies. They thought they had exiled a weak, emotional girl. They had no idea they had created a woman with a file full of evidence and nothing left to lose. The next morning, I booked a consultation with the best litigation attorney I could find. The tide was about to turn. My lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Ms. Albright, reviewed my file with a grimly satisfied expression. The bank statement established the transaction. The letter from my father to Aunt Carol, she explained, was a powerful piece of evidence. It demonstrated intent and acknowledged the nature of the funds, creating a strong argument for a constructive trust, a legal remedy for when one person holds property that rightfully belongs to another. They will not want this to go to court, Ms. Albright stated, looking at me over her glasses. The public airing of this letter would be deeply embarrassing for your father. We will send a demand letter. We will be firm. The letter was sent. It was concise and brutal, outlining the facts and demanding the full repayment of my initial investment, adjusted for a decade of real estate appreciation plus legal fees. It gave them 30 days to respond. The smear campaign intensified. It was their only remaining weapon. Linda's calls to relatives became more frantic. Chloe's social media posts became more pointed. But their panic was a sign that our legal move had hit its mark. I followed Ms. Albright's advice to the letter. I did not engage. I did not respond. I blocked the numbers of flying monkeys and documented everything, forwarding the most egregious messages to my lawyer. I lived inside a bubble of resolve, with Liam, my mom, Frank, and Aunt Carol as my impenetrable shield. As predicted, their own lawyer advised them that a court battle would be a costly, public, and almost certain loss. 30 days later, a settlement offer appeared. They tried to lowball us. We rejected it. The final settlement was signed a month after that. They were forced to agree to our original terms. To pay me, they would have to take out a massive second mortgage on the house, effectively crippling them financially and destroying the very comfort and security they had denied me. The check that arrived via courier felt less like money and more like the physical weight of my reclaimed self-respect. I thought that would be the end of it, a quiet, bitter conclusion. But their arrogance had one last, spectacular act. A month after the settlement, my Aunt Carol sent me another link. It was to a GoFundMe page. The title was Help Robert and Linda After Devastating Family Betrayal. My blood ran cold as I read the text, a masterful work of fiction penned by Linda and Chloe. It spoke of a sudden and catastrophic financial blow from a painful family dispute, hinting at mounting legal bills and the risk of losing their home. They painted themselves as elderly victims, financially ruined by a cruel, unnamed family member. They had raised over $3,000 in 2 days. The audacity was breathtaking. They had taken my money, exiled me, smeared my name, been forced by law to return what was mine, and now they were playing the victim to the entire world to profit from their own lies. But they had underestimated Aunt Carol. For a day, she did nothing. She watched the donations climb and the sympathetic comments roll in. Then, when the page was at its peak of visibility, she acted. She made a donation of $10, just so she could leave a public comment. Her comment was not emotional. It was factual. It was precise. And it was devastating. She wrote, I feel everyone donating deserves the full story before giving their hard-earned money. The devastating family betrayal mentioned here was my brother, Robert, being legally required to return the six-figure inheritance he took from his daughter, Anna, 10 years ago to buy this very house. The unnamed family member is the daughter he exiled from his life because her happiness made his other daughter feel sad. I am attaching a letter my brother wrote to me at the time, acknowledging the money was Anna's and was meant to be a security for her future. The only betrayal here is a father breaking a sacred promise to his child. I suggest you ask for your money back. And beneath the text, she uploaded the crystal-clear image of my father's handwritten letter. The effect was nuclear. It was like dropping a truth bomb into a garden of lies. The GoFundMe page exploded. The tone of the comments shifted instantly from sympathy to outrage. People demanded refunds. Old friends of my father posted, Robert, is this true? The page was taken down within 3 hours, but the damage was done. The screenshots were everywhere. their social standing, the one thing Linda prized above all else, was incinerated. Justice, it turned out, could be delivered not just in a courtroom, but in a comment section. 6 months later, Liam and I stood in the empty living room of our new home. We'd used the money from the settlement as our down payment. Sunlight streamed through the large windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It was quiet. It was peaceful. It was ours. I ran my hand along the cool plaster of the wall, a wall that held no secrets, no betrayals. For years, I thought family was an obligation I had to endure, a debt I had to pay. I thought love meant making myself smaller to make others comfortable. I've learned that true family is a space where your happiness is celebrated, not seen as a threat. It's the unwavering support in Liam's eyes, the fierce loyalty in my mother's voice, the quiet courage of my Aunt Carol. The hardest thing I ever did was close the door on my father. It was an act of profound grief. But in doing so, I opened the door to my own life. I see now that I didn't lose a family. I escaped a cage. And as I stood there with Liam, sunlight warming my face, I felt the final, satisfying click of a lock turning, not on a door, but on a chapter of my life I was finally, truly done with. I was free to build my own foundation.